This is a Midwest Minute with Matt. Simple concussion conversations that just make sense. Before we get started, just a quick note. This podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. It is not medical advice and does not replace evaluation or treatment from a qualified healthcare provider. Listening to this podcast does not establish a provider-patient relationship. Every brain injury is unique, and what we discuss may not directly apply to your situation. If you're experiencing symptoms or have concerns, please seek care from a licensed medical professional. If this is an emergency, call 911 or your local emergency services immediately. Hello and welcome to another episode of a Midwest Minute with Matt. Simple concussion conversations that just make sense. My name is Matt Campbell and I am your host, and today we have episode number 15 titled, How Do I Know If I've Done Too Much? One of the most difficult questions that we get asked during concussion recovery is, how can I tell if I've done too much? Maybe you got up and you ran errands, or you got up and went to school or work, you hung out with some friends, you went to your therapy appointments, and later that day or even into the next day, you just feel worse. Symptoms have gone up and you don't understand why. Telling somebody that they've done too much is a difficult thing to explain because not everybody is going to feel symptoms in that exact moment. Not everybody's going to get symptomatic in the environment that they're in, and it can be challenging to gauge whether or not you've done too much. Today, we're going to sit down and talk about some practical strategies on how to tell if you've done too much, what our symptoms going up really means, and how we can use that feedback to the best of our advantage moving forward during your concussion recovery. Concussion recovery is a fine line between doing too much and not enough. One of the most difficult parts of trying to help somebody through concussion recovery is if I give you something to do 10 times for the next 10 days, you might feel 10 totally different ways afterwards. And it's that frustration of trying to figure out, how do I know if I've done too much? Your capacity for activity in the brain is not a fixed thing. It's not going to be consistent every single day. And it makes that challenging trying to figure out where that fine line between doing too much and not enough comes from. During concussion recovery, we have to figure out where that fine line is at for that day or for that time in your concussion recovery. That capacity for activity will change based on a couple of different things. The easy ones, it'll change based on sleep, stress, illness, mental effort, the things that you're doing that are requiring you to be physically and mentally available, what those things are doing to stimulate the brain, that will cause a change in our capacity. The environment that we're in is one of the biggest indicators of that change in functional capacity. If I'm in an environment with a bunch of bright lights and a bunch of noise with a bunch of people moving around, that's much more difficult than me just sitting at home on the couch by myself in a quiet and calm environment. If I can control my environment, that capacity generally will be higher. But the capacity changes based on a number of factors. So when we're sitting down trying to establish where your baseline capacity for activity during concussions, we need to take a look at what we have planned that day and even the night before to try to figure out where our capacity lies. If you've ever heard me talk, you understand that sleep is one of the most difficult things during concussions to get consistently. But that consistent high quality and high quantity of sleep will actually help increase our capacity for activity for that day. If we had a really good night's sleep the day before, generally speaking, our capacity for activity is going to be higher. On the flip side of that, if we've had a rough night of sleep, a lot of broken sleep, we don't feel rested, we don't feel like we got a good quality of sleep, our capacity for activity will generally be lower. So we need to take those things into consideration when we're trying to establish where that capacity lies. If you've had a bad day or really low capacity over the course of a couple days, that capacity will change every day. It's not a death sentence. It's not every time we talk, we're going to have a terrible capacity. Capacity will change. So just like we can go from good days to bad days, keep in mind that we can go from bad days to good days. It doesn't mean that you're stuck in a low capacity situation. It will fluctuate on a day-to-day basis. Your capacity changes. Recovery means trying to assess where that capacity is and listening to it as we move forward. Keep in mind that your symptoms are feedback. Symptoms are not punishment. It's not something that you do wrong. It's the brain telling you that it doesn't like something that we've done, and we need to listen to them. For some people, in some activities, in some situations, symptoms will come on right away. We'll start to notice that we're getting headaches or we're getting dizzy or we're starting to get nauseous, and we can make adjustments in that time frame. For some people, though, those symptoms don't come on right away. And that's the challenging part of trying to navigate where our capacity lies, is symptoms may not present right away. We need to make sure that we're going into an environment or into an activity knowing we need to put constraints on you and time constraints to make sure that we're not overloading your system before we even know what's going on. Symptoms aren't always punishment. They are always information, though. They will tell us what we need to know. They're the brain's way of saying, hey, look, I've had enough of this activity today. We did too much today. We need to sit down and we need to take a break and relax. Symptoms are feedback. It doesn't mean that you failed at what we're doing. Hopefully we can identify those symptoms, and early on those symptoms will change. But I can tell you, if you ignore those symptoms, the brain is going to fight back enough that the brain will win and get you to shut down. We need to take the feedback that the brain is trying to give us and modify our activities moving forward. So now that we understand that symptoms aren't punishment, but they're feedback, what does doing too much actually look like? You may have exceeded capacity that you have available for the day if symptoms increase significantly. And when I talk about significantly, the general rule of thumb is 2 points on a 0 to 10 scale. If I'm getting ready to go into work or I'm getting ready to go out to dinner with my friends or go into school, I'm going to take a look at what my symptoms are on a scale of 0 to 10 before I start. I'm going to rate my headache, my dizziness, my nausea, my mental fogginess, and I'm going to say, hey, look, each one of these has a numerical value. If I'm out there and my symptoms go up 2 points on a 0 to 10 scale, I know that I'm starting to get a significant increase in symptoms due to my limited capacity. I need to modify what I'm doing. But symptom increasing in the time is difficult for some people to identify. So ways that we can look at, hey, did we over exceed the capacity that we have? We need to look at how we feel the next day or later in that same day. Because symptoms may not come on right away, we need to look at what happens as we're navigating through the remainder of our day and into the next night. When I'm sitting down and talking with a patient, one of my things that I will try to get them to understand is we should wake up feeling better than we did when we went to bed. If we wake up feeling worse than we did when we went to bed, we know that we've exceeded our capacity for activity, our capacity for information, or our capacity for interaction from that previous day. That next morning is a telltale sign. If I wake up feeling miserable the next morning, I need to look at what I did the day before, and we need to make adjustments to that activity level because we've exceeded where the capacity lies. So it's challenging, but we need to look at the feedback that we're being given when we wake up that following morning. Some other ways that we can tell if we've exceeded our capacity for the day is if I leave an environment and it takes me longer to recover than normal. Normally I can go to work for 4 hours, and then when I come home, I lay down for 15 to 20 minutes, and then I can get up and kind of function the rest of the day. If we're taking a half hour to an hour and we're still not seeing improvement, that's a telltale sign that we've exceeded the capacity that we have. We need to make sure that we're listening to that. If we get run down and are completely wiped out after doing an activity, we know that we've got that feedback that we exceeded what we were doing. If symptoms are continuing to increase as the day goes on, we know that we've exceeded our capacity. We need to listen to the feedback that's happening. We need to listen in real time, and we need to make sure that we're looking back after we get the feedback on what activities that we've done, and can we modify those activities after the fact. Just because we've overloaded your capacity for the day does not mean that we've caused more damage to the brain. It does mean that we are delaying recovery, but it doesn't mean that we've caused more damage. It means that we're learning where your limits are and we need to adjust our activities. If you don't adjust your activities, you will prolong your recovery. If we're adjusting and learning from the feedback, we can take the lessons that the brain is trying to teach us. It can help guide your concussion recovery moving forward. So now let's say that you've had a symptom increase and you're trying to figure out, what do I do next? The first step is try not to panic. This will change. This will improve. Just because we have a symptom flare because of overload does not mean that we've done more damage to the brain. It doesn't mean that you're going to feel like this forever. Try to take a step back, relax, and focus on, what was I doing? How long was I doing it? Is there something that's different today compared to the last time I tried that activity? When I sit down with somebody and I'm trying to help them through their journey, I sit down and say, okay, going into it, how did you feel? Did you feel pretty good going into it? Or were you already behind the 8 ball trying to force your way through an activity that we know does not make our system feel good? Taking those questions and looking at the answers, using those answers to modify our activities moving forward is how we can learn what our capacity is for that day. I will sit here and remind you that learning the capacity that you have for activity is one of the hardest things during concussion recovery. It is difficult for everybody. Concussion recovery is a fine line between doing too much and not enough. We have to figure out where that fine line is, and we have to adjust our activities based on where your fine line is for that day or that time of day. Recovery isn't about avoiding the fine line. It's about learning where that line is and making adjustments so we don't cross it. We want to continue to stimulate you enough during your concussion recovery that we're getting neurogenesis, we're getting that recreation and reconnection of neurons, but we're not avoiding the line by avoiding activities and sitting in a dark room not doing anything. The goal isn't to avoid activities forever. It's to make adjustments and modifications to the activity that we're doing, the time or the duration that we're doing them, and then listening to the feedback that's happening during the event and after the event to make sure that we know what's causing our symptoms to go up. Remember, the following day is a really good indicator on what we've done that may or may not be too much from the previous day. If you're waking up feeling worse than you did when you went to bed, that generally means that we've done too much and we need to modify what you were doing yesterday going into today. Recovery isn't about avoiding your limits. It's about learning what your limits are, pushing the boundaries without overloading your system, and continuing to put one foot in front of the other during your concussion recovery. Everyone will exceed their symptom capacity at some point during their concussion recovery. I don't care if you have the world's worst concussion recovery or the easiest concussion recovery. Everybody will overload their system at some point during their journey. It isn't about avoiding symptoms. It isn't about being perfect and navigating through our concussion recovery. It's about taking the feedback that we're learning from our symptoms, modifying our activities, and continuing to put one foot in front of the other to put together small, consistent wins during concussion recovery. If this episode helped something click, share it with somebody who needs it. If you'd like to learn more or need more guidance during your concussion recovery, visit mwconcussion.com to learn more. If you'd like to be a guest on the podcast or have a topic for a future episode, DM me at mwconcussion on all major social media platforms. I would love to sit down and have another Midwest Minute with Matt.